They called her the gatekeeping doll, until one night, when everyone else was asleep, and only she saw the shadow slip through the fence. The story below, it's not about a loud hero, but about a woman who chose to do what was right when no one thought she could. Her name was Elena Ruiz, 32 years old, private in the military police, stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, one of the largest military bases in America, nestled in the heart of the state, among low hills and dusty red plains. She was small, barely 5'2". She had a slim build, narrow shoulders, and dark skin typical of the Southwest. Her black hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck. Her face wasn't sharp or cold, but soft, calm. Her brown eyes, deep and gentle, seemed made to observe, not to judge, in a formation full of towering figures and boisterous laughter. Elena almost faded into the background, and so she was often overlooked. Maybe it was because of the task she was assigned, almost permanently standing guard at the night shift of Alpha Gate, the main entrance to the base, a metal box of a guard post, thick-walled, cramped, positioned at the edge of the wide asphalt road leading into the heart of the camp, a place soldiers jokingly called the dead end of a soldier's life. No tactical duties, no contact with commanders, and certainly no chance to shine in a military record. The shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. In all those hours, aside from the occasional late-night supply truck or a passing patrol vehicle, there was hardly anyone. Because of that, the job was always seen as easy, and easy jobs were given to those deemed unimportant. Elena took the assignment without protest. She never asked for a different shift, never complained. But every time she stepped out of the duty room, her M4 rifle slung over her shoulder, back straight, her boots making the softest sound against the ground. She always heard the familiar voices from behind the glass door. Here comes the gatekeeping doll again. A young soldier's voice chuckling. Hope it's just cats tonight. What's she gonna do if it's a real person? Laughter and agreement. Not cruel, but not exactly innocent. Elena heard it all. Every word was clear, as if they brushed past her helmet and landed on her shoulder. Sometimes older teammates, less harsh, would simply smile, wave, and tease as they walked by. Big win tonight. Hold that gate tight so it doesn't blow you away. Kid, she'd nod slightly, saying nothing. A faint smile. Sometimes she would make a subtle tilt of her rifle in response. No one knew what lay behind that smile, and no one asked. They thought she got the easy job because she was weak. They assumed she was quiet because she was shy. They saw her small frame and gentle eyes and thought they knew enough to judge. But no one knew that in the training logs at Fort Leonard Wood. Elena Ruiz's name was marked with a quiet note. Calm, quick reflexes, expert marksmanship. No one read that file when she was assigned to Fort Hood. They just looked and assumed. That night, like so many others, the sky was black, moonless. The wind from the prairie whistled through the barbed wire, sharp like metal scraping together. She stood alone at the guard post, back straight, eyes fixed on the hazy darkness ahead. Her left arm rested on the rifle. Her right hand lightly brushed the strap on her shoulder. Inside the post, the light still glowed, and the laughter hadn't fully faded. But outside, in the dark, there was only her, alone. The night at Fort Hood was long and quiet. As it grew later, the cold crept through the thick uniform, seeping into her knuckles and her knees. The wind swept across the barbed wire fence, brushing past old shipping containers, making a sound that wasn't quite a howl nor a whistle, but like metal whispering something to the darkness. Elena stood still. No leaning against the wall. No huddling for warmth. She stood upright, her gaze fixed on the road ahead, the asphalt stretching out to the outer gate, pitch black, lit only by the faint pale glow of a high lamp behind her. Tonight, no vehicles came. No orders were issued. Nothing happened. Just the wind and the echoes of laughter from the previous shift. Here comes the gatekeeping doll again. The words weren't loud, but they hit like a small stone tossed through the glass of her mind. Not enough to break her, but enough to make her think. She never demanded recognition, didn't need a pat on the back or praise, but sometimes in the dead of night, when nothing stirred, those words played again as if her brain had recorded every syllable to replay at her emptiest moments. Hold that gate tight. Don't let the wind blow you away. No one knew what it was like to stand alone for 8 hours in the biting cold. No one knew what it felt like to remind herself every night, I'm doing this right, even if no one notices. During her brief break near 2 a.m., she sat in the guard post, no slouching, no resting her head. She opened her pack, pulled out a soft cloth, and disassembled her M4, wiping each part as if it were a priceless antique, though no visible dirt marred it. Then she checked her magazine, lifted each round, turned it slightly, and felt it with her fingers. Not out of fear, out of habit. She did this every night, a ritual to keep her mind steady. Finally, she lowered the rifle to her lap, stared out the glass door, and whispered to herself, it's fine. They don't need to believe in me. Just do it well. No one heard those words. And if they had, they probably wouldn't have understood. They didn't know she'd scored near-perfect marks on the long-range shooting test during military police training in Missouri, outshining even those who'd handled rifles for years before enlisting. No one remembered that in the final weeks of training, when her teammates headed back to their bunks after drills. Elena quietly returned to the range, setting up mock targets, practicing reloads, pivoting, and switching stances in the dark. She didn't want her skills to dull in the calm. She'd once read somewhere in an old training manual that the best warrior isn't the one who wins the most battles, but the one who never forgets how to hold their weapon. And Elena believed it. Believed it so deeply it coursed through her veins. In her year plus of standing guard, she'd learned to gauge the wind's direction by the rustle of leaves. She'd learned to tell the difference between the tread of a soldier's boots and the steps of someone unfamiliar with the terrain. She didn't need a light, just the glint of a license plate or a patch of fabric on a shoulder to identify someone. No one taught her these things. She taught herself, remembered, practiced, not to compete, not for praise, certainly not to prove anything to those who called her the gatekeeping doll. She did it for a simple reason. She believed that if she wore the uniform, even in the most seemingly pointless post, she had to stand tall. That night, when the clock read 3:15 a.m., Elena stepped out of the post, returning to her station. The cold wind stung her face. She pulled her collar a little higher and refastened the strap on her shoulder. Her eyes remained calm, but deep within them was a stillness taut, like a string waiting for a single touch. The nights at Fort Hood weren't just cold and long, they were full of opportunities if you knew how to listen. Elena didn't just stand guard. She observed in her own way, in the stillness, when her teammates dozed in the duty room, when the radio buzzed with repetitive code calls, and when even the stray cats stopped prowling the container roofs. She stepped outside, silent as a shadow. She didn't wander far, just paced the strip of the road by the gate. Slow steps, her boot heels touching the asphalt with just enough force to feel the ground, but not enough to echo. She paused, raised a hand, and felt the wind. Here, the wind shifted 3 or 4 times a night, depending on the temperature difference between the buildings inside and the open land beyond the fence. Elena didn't track it with a clock but with her skin and the way the wind slid past her collar. She learned to read the wind not for poetry but to know which direction sound would carry fast or be muffled. Tailwinds could let her hear 100 meters out. Headwinds blurred movements behind her. Night after night, hour by hour. She memorized the wind's habits like someone learning the breathing of a war horse. Then she turned to footsteps. Not her own, but others. At first, every sound blended together. Insects, wire clinking, all the same. But slowly, she began to distinguish military boots had a steady, heavy rhythm. The sneakers were soft and quick. Tactical team boots hit the ground with a solid thump. But the steps of someone trying to sneak, they always hesitated at the tip of the toe. That's where she learned to sense danger with her ears, no need to look. Some nights, when late supply trucks rolled in, she watched the reflective signs, how they flickered when something blocked the light. Even for a split second, she noticed that if someone passed a reflective plate, the light would cut out for just 0.8 seconds, enough for a sharp eye to catch. From there, she began patrolling in her mind, building a small map in her memory of every sign, every wall gap, every shadowed post. She knew where light dimmed, where someone could hide, and where to shoot if she had to stop an intruder before they crossed the second fence. Around 4 a.m. When the silence was so deep she could hear her own breathing. She returned to the guard post, locked the door, and drew the curtain. Then, in total darkness, she set her M4 on the table. No light, no gloves. She began, removed the stock, detached the sight, released the safety pin, separated the upper and lower receivers, checked the bolt, the recoil spring, and the buffer. Each motion was like playing an instrument with its own rhythm, crisp, sharp, flawless. Eyes closed, her hands traced each part as if she'd learned them with her flesh, not her sight. Then she reassembled, fast, not rushed, but precise. Once, when she overheard new recruits joking, "Bet the doll hasn't stripped a rifle more than 5 times. Elena quietly smiled. She'd done it over 500 times in just 1 year. And not just that. She memorized the emergency lock positions on the 3 gates around Alpha, counted the steps from the guard post to the backup power shed, learned to pick locks with a multi-tool if needed, even memorized the color codes of the gate control box wires in case the main power failed. No one assigned her those tasks. No one asked. But she knew if something went wrong, there'd be no time to check a manual. She was the guard. If she wasn't ready, who would be in the military? You don't always need a battlefield to hone your skills. Sometimes, all it takes is enough silence, enough darkness, and enough resolve to stay sharp in the calm. And Elena, through those seemingly dull nights, quietly rebuilt her entire skill set, like someone sharpening a blade that was already keen but left buried in a drawer no one bothered to open. That night, the sky was a thick, unrelenting black. No moon, no stars. The wind blew from the north, sharp and cold, like a thin blade grazing her cheek. Fort Hood fell silent, as if every movement was smothered under a heavy, damp velvet cloth. Elena stood at her usual post, right by the 3rd lamppost where the light slanted. Not bright enough to dazzle, but enough to illuminate the road and part of the barbed wire fence beyond. She stood tall, knees slightly bent, her right hand resting lightly on her rifle strap. Her eyes seemed half closed, but they were gliding softly over every shadow, every gap, every gust of wind. It was nearly 3 a.m., the hour when the human body is at its weakest, the hour when even the most vigilant let their guard slip just a little. Back in the guard room, the light was dim. A few young soldiers dozed with heads bowed, rifles propped across their laps more as a formality than readiness. And then it came. A faint sound. Not a rat, not a cat, not the wind dragging sand. A brief scrape, like fabric brushing lightly against metal. Then silence. Elena didn't turn her head. She tilted her ear slightly. Her hand slid down, touching the rifle's grip. Another sound. Fainter. But she heard it. Her eyes locked onto the distant fence, a spot no direct light reached, only faintly lit by the glow of a reflective warning sign 20 meters away. For a moment, the light caught something, not a post, not a tree, not a cat, a human shape. Low, crawling, slipping through the wire. No uniform, no reflective strips, no insignia, and no signal to approach the base. She'd learned enough to know this wasn't a soldier, and they weren't here to ask for directions. Her hand tightened on the grip. No panic, no rush. She took a deep breath, shifted her weight to her left foot, and stepped silently out of the light, moving toward the nearest lamppost for cover. Not a sound, no radio call, no waking her team. Not because she wanted to act alone, but because she knew in the next few seconds, if no one reacted, everything could change. The stranger was moving fast. They'd cleared the first fence. Short, quick, hugging the ground, moving like someone trained, but not American military trained. This movement was more like infiltration drills used for sabotage, breaching, or destruction. Elena counted silently in her head. 1, 2, 3. 4 more steps, and they'd reach the closest point to the control gate where a single explosive could disable the entire electronic secondary fence system. She couldn't wait. Her left hand rose, thumb flicking the safety off. Her right hand steadied, eyes aiming into the dark where the figure had just emerged. The wind veered left. She adjusted the barrel a fraction, a habit from those nights practicing against headwinds years ago. Her finger rested on the trigger, but she didn't fire. She waited for them to expose half their body right between the 2 rows of warning signs. That moment like a held note stretched taut in a silent song. She spoke, voice low, steady, clear but soft. Stop. 1 more step. I shoot. The shadow froze, like an animal caught in a sudden beam of light. The base remained silent. No one knew. No one stirred. Elena's grip was rock steady. No trembling, no shouting, no agitation. The figure stood still. Then suddenly they bolted toward the gate. No turning back, no words. As if determined to barrel past her, no matter the cost. In that moment, less than a second, she pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked, dry and sharp. A small spark flared from the pavement, inches from their feet. The bullet didn't kill them, but it stopped them cold. The shadow collapsed to their knees, gasping, hands raised. No resistance. Elena stepped forward, firm. The rifle was still aimed, eyes unblinking. No one inside knew what had just happened, but out here a real test had begun, and she alone stood on the thin line between peace and peril. He froze after the first shot, not out of fear, but surprise. Maybe he didn't think the guard would actually fire. Maybe he was used to hesitation, to people assuming they'd have time to react after a bold move, but Elena didn't wait. She'd counted to 3 long ago. Her finger was already on the trigger. Her aim was set. The first bullet wasn't meant to kill. It struck the asphalt a hand's width from his boots and sending a sharp echo and a small spark flaring up. Not enough to ignite, but enough to make him understand. The woman holding the rifle wasn't hesitating, and the next shot, if needed, wouldn't aim for his feet. The shadow halted. Hands slowly rose, not quite surrendering but no longer moving. Elena held her position for 2 more seconds. Then she stepped forward. Slow, but steady. No shouting, no calling for backup. She didn't need noise, just clear action. She circled lightly from right to left, keeping the exact distance to control the situation without being vulnerable if he suddenly lashed out. At 3 paces away, she ordered, voice low but firm, "Kneel. Hands in front." He hesitated for a moment. Then he knelt to his knees, head bowed. Elena stepped closer, her left foot lightly pressing between his shoulder blades, forcing his shoulders down, a subtle move from an advanced restraint course often skipped in basic training. Her right hand kept the rifle steady, and her left pulled the cuffs. She snapped them shut. The metallic click rang out like the sound of a timely decision locking into place. She leaned in, using her foot to nudge open his jacket. A metal object slid out, a handgun, not military-issued. No need to check further, no need to guess. Elena bent down, using the edge of her boot to lift the gun and toss it aside. Then she pulled him up, turned him, and pushed him toward the checkpoint behind. As she walked, she glanced at the guard room. 3 young soldiers were still slumped, dozing against the wall. One cracked an eye open, saw Elena escorting a cuffed man, and jolted upright, fumbling for his rifle, too late to act. Elena said nothing to them. She brought the intruder to the internal holding area and secured the gate. Only when it was done, only then did she turn and press the intercom. "Intrusion detected. Suspect detained. Need a response team for handover." Her voice even, calm and unhurried. No boasting, no demands. Just a report the way a soldier completes a task. On the other end, the duty officer's voice crackled through static. "Repeat. Private Ruiz." "What did you say?" Elena pressed the button once more. Clearer. "Unauthorized intrusion. No uniform. Concealed weapon. Suspect cuffed. I'm holding at point A." Silence. Then chaos, chairs scraping, doors slamming, footsteps pounding. The base woke up. But the critical moment, the one that mattered most, was already over, because it was at the exact time when no one thought anything could happen. And in the exact place everyone assumed was dull, safe. One person once called the gatekeeping doll didn't wait for orders. She acted, and she turned the tide, needing no help, needing no witness. The next morning, the sky was still overcast, and the early wind was not yet clearing the mist. Fort Hood seemed to wake slower than usual. No alarms, no morning chants, but the air felt heavier, as if someone had opened a door long thought sealed. News of the intrusion spread within 30 minutes of the morning briefing. The security commander left his office with no ceremony and no prior notice, heading straight for Alpha Gate. A black military police vehicle pulled up. Doors opened. A team of investigators in body armor stepped out. The intruder was led away, hands still cuffed, head bowed, steps unsteady. And Elena still. Elena walked just behind him, calm, composed, expressionless. Her uniform was crisp, not a crease out of place, hair neatly tied. The rifle strap is aligned precisely at her left shoulder. No one told her to be there. She didn't ask to witness, but as the vehicle drove off, she stood watching until it vanished past the internal checkpoint, then turned back to her post. The ones who'd laughed at her the day before were there now. They didn't laugh. A young sergeant, face still marked from dozing against a wall, approached her slowly. His boots were half-laced. His right hand fumbled with a crooked cap. He stopped, eyes on the ground. His voice was quiet, uncertain. I'm sorry, I was wrong about you." The words fell heavy, unanswered. Elena didn't speak. She gave a slight nod as if she heard but didn't need to hold on to it. Then she turned away, pulled a magazine from her pouch, checked it, and secured it. returned to her familiar post as if nothing had happened. To her, recognition wasn't necessary. She didn't wait for trust, didn't demand thanks, didn't need praise. The only thing she kept was her principle. That afternoon, the command issued an official notice night shifts would be reevaluated and security coordination strengthened. Some emergency response protocols would be updated. And in a small handwritten note at the bottom, the commander's words were clear, acknowledging the disciplined, timely, and non-lethal response by Private Elena Ruiz, recommended for priority promotion. The notice was pinned to the bulletin board. No one dared take it down, but Elena didn't read it. She'd left the office long before, back at her post, continuing her shift like any other night. And that night, when her shift ended near 6 p.m., the sky still hadn't fully brightened. Elena stood alone by the fence, where the asphalt road stretched out from the base. That was where the intruder had slipped through. The early breeze was gentle, no longer cold, but still enough to make an unaccustomed hand tremble. She looked into the distance, far enough that ordinary eyes saw only blurred black and the faint red glow at the horizon. She raised her hand, lightly touching her rifle. Her fingertips brushed the metal, still warm from her body's heat, and she whispered, to herself alone, not to prove it to them, but to never betray myself. Then she turned, walked back inside. The guard post closed behind her. As always, as if nothing had happened. That small soldier didn't need validation to be worthy. Just one night, one action, one moment of standing firm in the dark. That's how the quiet ones carve their names, not into reports, but into the silent respect of those who once underestimated them. If this story touched you, share it with those who've been overlooked. Subscribe to the channel to catch the next story, and leave a comment, because somewhere, an Elena might need to be heard. See you again, in the quiet nights, where the silent ones still stand watch.